Welcome to I'm a Survivor of Domestic Violence, Inc., a podcast series that brings together real survivor stories, expert advice, and resources to help empower those on the journey of healing. I'm your co-host, Michelle DiBernardo, and joined by me is my amazing co-host, Sean Bryan. We're diving deep into the critical topic of legal rights for survivors of domestic violence and the role of advocacy in helping survivors navigate the often complex and intimidating legal system.
That's right, Michelle. For many survivors, the legal system can feel quite overwhelming, especially when you're already dealing with the trauma of the abuse. Today, we're going to break down some of the essential legal rights survivors should know about and explore how advocacy, organizations, and legal professionals can actually provide the support needed to take the first steps towards safety and justice, and finally, your recovery with your family and loved ones.
We'll be covering everything from protection orders to legal aid and sharing real-world insights on how to navigate the process. Whether you're personally navigating the system, supporting a loved one, or just seeking knowledge, this episode is for you. So let's get started. Hello, Chris, and welcome to I'm a Survivor of Domestic Violence, Inc. How are you today?
I'm great this evening. Happy holidays to you and everyone watching. It's been just a lovely day with the family, and overall, this break has been just very rewarding. So thank you for it.
Good.
I just want to say personally, as a founder of I'm a Survivor of Domestic Violence, Inc., 501c3, located in Las Vegas, Nevada, it's a pleasure to have you. You came highly recommended as a resource, and I look forward to hearing your responses to our questions. So welcome.
Cheers. Thank you for having me.
Chris, just before we get into the questions, just give us a rundown of, the organization that you work with and why domestic violence awareness is so important to you.
Okay, so my name is Chris Lake. I am an advocate for those who are vulnerable across New York. I'm stationed out of Queens, New York right now. 10 years ago, I started my nonprofit Community for a Cause to address, at that time, it started with a singular issue. It was childhood lead poisoning. As time went on, I realized I have the ability to address more than just one issue. And that ballooned into homelessness, that ballooned into environmental cares. And I was actually at a retreat up north in New York, and I was with other people who are looking for solace and healing. And very many people I was surrounded with were suffering from domestic violence and sexual assault. And as I was having a meditation session, I asked myself, is there something more I can do with my position to better serve those who are affected by this? And this issue's always kind of appalled me because, unfortunately, almost every single woman I've known has been a victim of sexual assault or domestic violence across socioeconomic lines, racial lines, different backgrounds, etc. And so, going to this retreat kind of opened my eyes to say, there's more you can do. And so in 2020, I decided I was going to take on sexual assault in particular. And I asked myself, where do I start? And I came across a bill in New York that was being introduced, but didn't have that much momentum. And I was confused by the fact this bill even existed. And we'll go down this rabbit hole as far as you guys want. But in New York State currently, there is what's called the voluntary intoxication exclusion. It was previously known as a voluntary intoxication loophole. And what that means essentially is if someone is a survivor of sexual assault and the circumstances of which it happened, they happen to have chosen to become intoxicated. They drank too much on their own volition or a combination of drinking and drugs or just drugs. And thereafter, they were sexually assaulted. Unfortunately, New York does not have that codified as a law. So that is not taken to court. And it was such an issue that the previous DA of Manhattan, Cy Vance, actually penned a letter to the governor and said, guys, I can't take these cases up. These are the most frequent cases of sexual assault I come across. No prosecutor wants to touch it because it's not codified. So even if someone is found guilty, here's the kicker, it can easily be appealed because it's not codified. So it's a toothless situation for people who are suffering one of the worst situations a person can face. And once I found out legislation, I was off to the races. I teamed up with the senator who penned the bill. I gathered a small coalition back in 2020, which graduated into a much larger coalition in 2022. And we've done grassroots lobbying. We've gathered over 23 organizations to our Justice Without Exclusion coalition to really raise awareness, but even more so, tap into the legislative branch of New York and make sure those who will put the pen to paper and codify things are voting on these issues. And it is quite the uphill battle, let me tell you, but we have fight in us.
Wow. Well, congratulations.
Thank you. There's still work to be done, so you can congratulate me in June. Hopefully it passes.
Fingers crossed.
Right. And then in terms of domestic violence, it goes hand in hand, right? When we're working with these advocacy groups, we come across those who focus on sexual violence, we come across those who focus on domestic violence, and there's so much overlap. And then about 2 years ago, I started giving talks at colleges like John Jay to make people aware. Personally, my personal goal is to be able to speak to exclusively male audiences to discuss sexual etiquette, if you will, because I feel like there needs to be a conversation. I'm sure Sean can back me on this. Men don't get enough young men don't get enough men talking to them about sex, dating, sexual etiquette, what is okay, what is dated information that maybe a cousin might have told them, that an uncle told them, that they don't realize that's not okay anymore. And really give them space. Had a really interesting conversation in Flatbush with younger children. They were in, I want to say 6th grade. And I was giving a sex ed conversation with them. And I love the place we came to. First, it's kids. So you have to combat the rowdiness and the silliness for the first 5-10 minutes. And once you do establish that rapport, they feel more comfortable and confident. They can ask serious questions. And so we were able to have a dialogue about what things are inappropriate to do sexually, what things they might think would be funny to do. And I have to explain to them, that's disrespectful. And if you do this, you have to recognize the person who's receiving that will not want to engage with you again. So understand the value of what you plan to do, what you think is funny, what is and is not the time and place for certain things, and what just simply belongs purely in movies and is not to really be tested out or tried. But that's really my goal. I want younger men to understand, especially consent issues, because a lot of young men don't understand that coercion is trampling on someone's boundaries, and that can really violate someone's consent in a way that a young man might not realize they're doing. That doesn't mean that they're not culpable. It means, however, that there are some who really could use someone to just explain the scenario to them so that they don't make that error, so that they don't intentionally do such. And those who can be converted to better ways will be converted to better ways.
And you said that you spoke.
Sorry.
So, yeah, there's like some weird feedback. So you've spoken.
Yes, I spoke at John Jay University last year, and then they had me as a panel discussion guest for their Seeing Rape production. So every year they have a creative writing class that actually they write vignettes, scenes of sexual assault, and they invite the students to, and it's not, it's obviously not the action. It's dialogue and a scene discussing like what happened last night. Oh, didn't you go on a date with Brian? How did that go? I don't want to talk about it. And there would be insinuations and discussions, and it's so fascinating the way they address it because they allow the students to tap into their own experiences and their culture. And I particularly find it fascinating to learn how different cultures globally view sexual assault, how parents in different cultures can sometimes either look the other way or be accusatory in response. We obviously need better support systems, top down and bottom up, for survivors, for potential survivors, for perpetrators, for potential perpetrators, because there's just more dialogue that needs to be had. What you guys are doing is great because you're opening the space for more dialogue to be had. On the topic of domestic violence, that's another issue that a lot of people don't realize the methods of how to maintain a relationship, so to speak, are internalized in different people's heads. I was telling some people that I work with, I remember in my 20s that I came across friends who learned, what were they called? They were called pickup. They were pickup camps. There's these. I use the term loosely here. They're men who teach young men how to pick up women, right? And they refer to themselves as pickup artists, okay? And they have all these techniques, and it's psychological warfare. The stuff is sick, and because a lot of what they're doing essentially is they intentionally demean and demoralize the woman so that their self-esteem is lower, so that the man can then feel more confident and comfortable proceeding with the relationship. And the thing is, there are camps and there are people who are teaching young men these methods of control and these methods of degradation, and the young men don't realize what violence they're enacting, what psychological violence they're enacting. Some do, obviously some do, but a lot don't. My crusade, my personal mission is to find the ones who don't realize, because there may always be some who simply have no empathy and will treat others the way they decide to treat others. But those who essentially can see the light, I really want to be able to have more dialogue so that they realize this is not the right way and there's a better way.
Yeah. Okay. So, what are some of the most important legal rights that survivors of domestic violence should know about when seeking protection or justice?
Okay, that is a great question. Three off the top of my head. Want to make sure that they know they have the right to protection orders, you have the right to safety and shelter, and you have the right to legal support. I do want to stress a very important thing for survivors of domestic violence to do is to keep a open communication with the community, keep a paper trail, find whatever spaces you can to keep yourself safe, and keep information safe. One app that I've come across, it's a wonderful app that helps those who are in the throes of domestic violence. It's called Victim's Voice. You can go to victimsvoice.app. And what this does, it's an off-phone app. Okay, that way you don't have to download anything. If a husband or a partner is one who snoops and readily monitors the phone, and they won't come across the app. What this service does, it allows you to upload videos, audios, pictures, everything and anything that's essentially evidence that you would need to use in court or want to use in court for you to create a paper trail with. And this goes to hospital visits. If your abuser punches a hole in the wall, if they are excessive drinker, taking pictures of an empty 12-pack, or if they're using drugs, taking pictures of that. If they hurt the animals, if they hurt their pets, take pictures of that. Upload this. If you can, without being noticed, record audio when they're upset, and then upload that. things like this. Obviously, of course, please be careful as you do attempt to take any pictures or videos or audio. We don't want you to put yourself in harm's way. But at the same time, the more of a paper trail you have, the easier it is for you to have a case. Because unfortunately, when it's just your word against their word, many times a perpetrator or abuser, they can be very convincing. They can gaslight. They can use all psychological tools and tricks that make it very difficult for the one who is being abused to really get their case across. So getting protection orders are not easy. Sometimes you have to petition for that. There's different types. There's an emergency type. There's temporary and permanent. Figure out what works best for you. And before doing so, as I said, find your safe space. So if you have a friend, if you have a family member that's within physical proximity that you can travel to in a given night, you want to make sure that you already establish a line of communication with them and code words, safe words to let them know, I need to go tonight. I tell survivors that it's best if you can create a go bag of some sort. That way, if you do need to leave your partner, you have clothes, toothbrush, anything that you need, some cash, things that you need, important documents, personal documents, your license, etc., a copy if you need to get a copy, so you can safely just step away when you do need to do certain moves that may trigger your abuser into any sort of state of anger or rage. Sometimes if you do need to, you can get a go bag and have it set at work. I told people before, you don't necessarily want to pack the whole thing at once. You can take, an item of clothes a day and bring it to your work and then fill that bag bit by bit so it's not so obvious. But you do want to make sure that you do have a line of communication with someone that you trust and someone that you can travel to and get to. Oftentimes abusers will isolate their victims, both physically, socially, and if they're monitoring their phone, that's another situation that you need to be wary of as well. So do what you can to either reopen a line of communication with someone that you do love and trust that is physically nearby, whether it's friends, family, or coworker. But please, please, please share your story with those who you do trust. Let someone else know. You don't need to carry this all by yourself. It's too much to really take on by yourself. We all require it. So let that be in the forefront of you. So I said you have a right to legal support, obviously, and many states do offer low-cost legal support. You also have a right to law enforcement, so if you do need to call the police to intervene, you can do that as well. I do warn, however, know your partner. Depending on how aggressive or violent they are, be sure that you are, calling and you're not putting yourself in harm's way. Again, if you're hearing my words and this is in any way triggering, I do apologize, and I do want to just give a little push and say, this is a call for you, right? If you're hearing me say that you need to either get a go bag ready or call law enforcement, and your emotion is rising, something's wrong, okay? And if something's wrong, then it's very important for you to ask yourself, how can I put myself in a better place? A lot of times people use an old adage, the devil I know is better than the devil I don't know. That is an outdated phrase, statement, mentality. There's not just devils out there. I swear to you. There's plenty of good people, and there's some mediocre people who are just not devils. But you don't need to be drowning by yourself, consumed by this by yourself. And most abusers will aim to keep you isolated in so many ways so that you, again, check out victimsvoice.app. I'll be repeating that throughout this podcast because I do want people to visit that site. It's victimsvoice.app. It's a $40 subscription. I get no money for mentioning this. When I learned about it, I interviewed the person who created it. It was actually her daughter's idea as a tool to help victims of domestic violence. And it's one of the most brilliant things that I've heard because it really is a great advocacy source that keeps people safe. You also obviously have a right to confidentiality, and you have parental rights as well. So if children are involved, you also want to make the question about how do I keep them safe? How do I ensure that they will not have to suffer or watch me suffer? Sometimes the abuse is only on the partner and not the kids, but that's still affecting the kids. Just bear that in mind. Let's see what else. Some people have workplace protections legally, so they are entitled to leave work. If there are certain things like the Family Medical Leave Act does allow certain people to have those protections, so that's one thing to consider. And then survivors in some jurisdictions can't be evicted solely for domestic violence. That is often a reason that people are left unfortunately unhoused. So make sure that you look at your lease termination rights, study that as well. Let's see what else. Justice rights. Survivors have the right to participate in prosecution of the abuser. So you have the right to be informed, obviously. So anything that is going on with the case, you can always ask questions about. But again, the goal is to make sure you have a paper trail, keep the line of communication open with people in your community, and then reach out to the authorities when you have the safe space to leave. First create the safe space to leave, and then make your plan to reach out to the authorities. That way, throughout the entire process, you and your children, if they're also involved, continue to be safe.
Great answer. That was forceful information.
Sure.
Ready to get into our next?
Yeah, let's go.
Sean?
Sure am. Okay. Here we go. How can advocacy organizations or legal professionals help survivors navigate the legal system? Again, how can advocacy organizations and or legal representations professionals help survivors navigate the legal system?
Well, I mean, the good news for anyone who's been asking themselves that question is that is literally their job. So they will walk you through the nuts and bolts from A to Z. Any question you have, they will be there for you, and some are exceptionally hands-on. So don't be concerned with overwhelming them. Don't be concerned with inconveniencing them. I know so many advocates for domestic violence that give out their personal cell phone and they're available 24/7. Make the call.
Yeah.
Make the call. Make the call. They know what to do. They know what legal. Oh, Sean, you had a question?
No, I'm just gonna jump in for a minute on the tail end. The next part of that question was, in addition, what kind of support can they provide during criminal or family court proceedings?
So during criminal and court proceedings, they can help guide you towards the legal process. They can align you with a legal team. They can also be present with you in court so that you have emotional support. They can give you the sense of what will happen before, during, and after your court case. Some will provide transportation, and some will also provide you safe shelter. They will actually either set up they'll set up transportation for you, or they'll give you transportation themselves. So there's a bevy of different resources they can share with you. I believe you spoke with my associate, Will Rivera. He is someone he currently is in phase 2 of the David Prize. I'm so proud of him because what he wants to do is revolutionary. He wants to be able to give stipends to people who are suffering domestic violence so that they have a little extra cash to be able to move from the home to where they need to be. And this is just another example of some of the resources that advocacies are willing to give you. So they will go above and beyond for you in as many ways as they can. That being said, the shelter system can sometimes immediacy is not always an option, just to give the realness of the scenario. But that doesn't mean you don't want to try, because sometimes it might take a day, sometimes it might take a few more, but you want to get your name in there. You want to get your name in there because the abuser, unfortunately, for those who are hearing my words, the odds of them changing very, very slim. Very slim. And
Thank you. I just want to say that our foundation, everyone that joins as a volunteer or becomes a director, they have to go through a certification program, and in that certification, it's like 28 weeks. The last phase in the last module is basically becoming a domestic violence or human trafficking advocate to appear in court. So we train them and we show them what to expect in court and what can happen in court. Like a lot of times when the victim's in there, some of them are really battered bad, and this is not their first time being battered by the abuser or the perpetrator. And so they just become broken down. They can't even talk. They're like crying, and the judge is asking questions. So that's when we step in and say, as the advocate, can we step in for them? Because we know the whole case, we have the file. And that's when we kind of set the bar to let the judge know. And usually if there's criminal, kind of charges filed in addition to the application for the temporary restraining order, because in most states across the nation, you get a 14-day TPO. And then after the 14 days, if everything's cool or not cool, they have another hearing to see if they're going to extend it, because the first one usually is not issued in front of a judge. In some states it is, but they'll have a magistrate jump in like in the middle of the night and just talk to the police officer, take their information. And I'm usually involved in most of those situations too. But I think that there needs to be some new laws for domestic violence restraining orders, because I find, being the founder and talked to probably over 10,000 people to date, that 90% of the restraining orders that are denied because it's the first time a woman might be seeking it against the perp. But it doesn't mean necessarily that it's not important. I think when a woman makes a statement, and no matter what the situation is, they should take it seriously and mandate a 14-day TPO, because 90% of those people that call, I'd say 60, 70% end up either beaten up or stalked or tormented terribly and then get the restraining order afterwards. So I just wanted to add that.
You touched on something very interesting there, Sean, because that obviously that's infuriating. And obviously there's a culture issue of believing women and believing survivors that we can go down that rabbit hole, but we don't have that much time. I got to tuck my baby in 45 minutes. But, the concept of we need better laws. You're both in Nevada, correct?
I'm in Nevada.
You're in Nevada. Michelle, where are you?
Upstate New York, Syracuse.
All right, cool. So, Sean, I would say this, and I'm willing to work with you too, because it's a weird passion that I've had late in my life. But laws are not that hard to make; they're hard to pass. And like you said, the idea that a first-time request for TPO is often ignored. There can be a law that changes that, and there could be a law that requires some sort of consequence for when that's ignored. One way or the other, especially if 60 to 7% are going to be tormented thereafter, which is obviously what's going to happen. Again, after we get off this, we'll exchange information and figure out what we can do in Nevada and maybe New York as well. But that shouldn't be the case, right? If someone's requesting this, is obviously a reason, and for it to be looked at like, oh, it's your first time, so we don't know, we can't trust you. I feel like there needs to be some sort of explanation as to why you are not believing this person's words without abuse, physically, but like without seeing battery, without seeing something horrific.
Right.
Because that
you're not gonna. Let me just jump in for a minute. So many times when a female or a male, even in same-sex marriages, whatever the case may be, it'll be a first-time, application for the victim towards the perp or the boyfriend or the husband or the wife, what have you. And a lot of times what happens is, this is what the court will report as a judge or magistrate. They'll say, as the judge or as the magistrate judge or the superior court judge or the judicial officer, because those are the three that actually will and can legally, technically issue a TPO. What they'll say sometimes is, we really get this, and it completely blows me away, and get ready. They'll say, I know she's got a black eye. I know she looks terrible. Thank God she got medical assistance, blah, 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 blah. And then they say, well, the peace officers weren't there when the crime happened. So because we don't have witnesses that the police officers weren't there, we cannot issue the restraining order, but we'll do a order for maybe a psych evaluation and maybe anger management if it continues or something like this. And we're horrified, right? So then sometimes I'll say, well, what about the 12 witnesses I have in the courtroom that watched him and were willing to testify that she was dragged across the ground and thrown in the dumpster and she was beaten the whole way, and they're here to testify. And the judge says, I'm sorry, I can't hear any testimony. I'm not moving forward because I had to have had the way I run my court. And then they say, this is my court. And you have to say, yes, Your Honor, I understand. I have to have witnesses, and the police officers have to witness for us to prosecute criminally. So if it happens again, hopefully they'll arrive on time. And I'm like, I just say to myself, what are we what type of times are we living in? It's horrifying. So I think that there has to be stricter laws, and I'm working on a bill to put before the Senate. You can help me, probably 20 other people helping me. It's not easy to get a bill passed. It's called the Survivor Bill, where first-time offense of assault, you're getting a year in jail. And if it's not a serious assault, you'll get a year probation with anger management and drug and alcohol testing for a year. And then if you violate, you'll get the year. The second one's 5 years, and same situation. And if you get a third, you're looking at life, because these are like going to be probably, assault and battery charges with domestic violence as part of it. So I'm looking to really set the bar, because I think if you put something mandated, a new law nationally, men will think twice about punching their wife, throwing them down a flight of stairs and stuff like that, because right now they're getting away with murder, and it's very sad.
Well,
it's sad. Yeah.
You're onto something, because what's interesting, if you look back at the Violence Against Women's Act, the year after that act was passed nationally, there was a decline in domestic violence and sexual assault. I did a lot of research in the voluntary intoxication loophole / exclusion.
Yeah.
And there's 24 different states and districts in this country that have a law in the books, going back all the way back to 1975, that say if someone drank too much and you sexually assault them, that's clearly a crime. Right? New York and a couple other states, they're still putting that in a gray zone where they say, well, we don't really know. And what I find interesting is that across all 24, not all, I'll be very, very specific, across the overwhelming majority of those states, the following year, the rate of sexual assault dropped, particularly in first-time offenders, because the subset of ages that you saw this number drop the most was between 18 22-year-olds on college campuses, because word spread. Because there'll be one abuser who will do something, and they'll get caught, and they'll say, I didn't know this was a crime now. Word will spread around campus, word will spread in the communities, and then would-be perpetrators think twice. Like you said, men will stop hurting women if there's a national law, because they'll know I can't get away with this anymore. The concept that this judge is saying is it loses me, because if there is a straight assault and battery case, a police officer doesn't need to be present for proof that someone hurt someone else. Why is the context different when it's a man against a woman? That loses me, right? They're saying only in this specific context, if you hurt a woman, I can't verify unless another man in power witnessed it. That doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make sense. If you and I got in a fight and one of us ended up in a hospital and we called the cops, the other one's going and cut. No one. That same conversation doesn't exist. It doesn't. So, I think that's a point to bring up when you're making the bill and when you're talking to legislators, to bring up the lack of logic. It's illogical.
So let me jump in for a minute. So you ready for this one?
Probably not.
So most women and men get in domestic. Maybe it's something minor. The neighbors hear the banging off the walls or something, and someone's getting thrown around, dishes, smashing glass, whatever, right? So they hit 911. They show up at the door of the police offices, right? Now, this is heavily in the South, Mississippi, Georgia, Savannah, there's a lot more, but those are two that really come to my attention from things I had to go and testify on those states. So this is what happens. The police officer or the peace officer, whatever the situation, that they're named usually peace officers or police officers now. So they'll get to the door, what's going on? They come in the house. They'll take her outside. They usually have one female that takes her outside, and then they separate them and do the interviews. So then they come in, they sit them both down and say, this is the deal. So obviously there's some domestic violence going on. You're both denying it because you don't want to have the other one arrested. Well, guess what? We're thinking about arresting you both. Now listen, if either one of you want to go forward, we're going to have to arrest both of you, and your child's going to have to go into defects. In addition, the child goes into defects. You could get a hearing within 1 to 3 months. You're probably going to lose your child. So do you still want to go forward filing a police report? They both say they're horrified, right? The wife's fat lip, black eye, you know what I mean? And he's probably drunk or something, or just an abuser, or whatever the case may be, right? It's irrelevant. He should be arrested. She should be kept with the kids. Right. And that should be a restraining order issued. This is the gray area that women are getting battered, and even same-sex marriages. It's two men or two women, whatever the case may be. Somebody's getting abused and they're getting violated, and they just back down, and it keeps going on. And 24% of those types of situations, they end up having either homicides happen eventually because they keep getting away with this, the perpetrators, and or serious physical battery happens to them where they're laying stabbed up, or so it's hellacious. So these are the issues that I want brought up that we're talking about, that people can relate to what's going on, because I know firsthand what's going on out there in the United States and globally. And I often talk about London. The woman in London yearly over in central London, they're getting slaughtered like it's a slaughterhouse for cows. It's hellacious, and I feel so bad for them. I'm advocating in London as well. So I'm just saying there needs to be something drastic put to paper. New bill has to be issued, and hopefully by myself and others that are fighting for this to interact with the judicial system and the Senate to get a new bill passed. Maybe it'll ripple into other countries, because it's an epidemic globally, domestic violence. The things that are going on overseas here in America, this is like Disneyland for domestic violence. Over there, they're just getting killed, and they just file a report. It was a domestic violence. We don't know what happened, and they just file it, or they get probation, and that's it. It's hellacious. That's all I want to say.
That is heavy. Michelle, did you have a point you wanted to bring up?
I'll let you answer, and then I'll rewind a little bit with the next question.
Well, I mean, first I have to process, because it's heavy. It's really heavy. And I love the fact that you're looking globally, because let's be honest, for the next 2 years, most bills that are pro-women might have a little bit of pushback. So we have to find our ways to work around that. I mean, it affects everyone, so maybe not. It's still worth putting it out there. And again, I'm going to work with you. We're a team now, whether you like it or not. We're going to work on this together.
Thank you.
No,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Because, like you said, it's hellish, and there's so many issues that we're given and we're fed, and narratives that we're fed in the media, in social media, in common conversations that don't affect us much at all on the personal level. My neighbor, they moved out. My neighbor was a victim of domestic violence, and it threw me off so much. My wife and I have been married for the last 6 years, and I moved in about 7 years ago. And I remember the first time that I heard that, I didn't realize it was my next door neighbor. I saw her the next day. I thought it was my upstairs neighbor. I saw her the next day, and I said, "Hey, Jane Doe. Jane, did you hear the neighbors upstairs? That was crazy." And her response was like, "I don't know what you're talking about." And she just, big eyes, and I realized immediately, like, oh my God, it was her. And I just put her in this awkward box, and now I know that you're suffering domestic violence. And, from there on, whenever I would intervene. I'm someone who has you could say I have the luxury of exercising my privilege as a 200-pound black man. I can get away with intervening in certain situations with relative safety, and I have. And surprisingly, it's effective when a man does step in and say something. I'm living to tell the tale. There have been multiple, at least 3 I can think of at the top of my head, where I stopped something dead in action, just because I looked around. I was like, it's on me. There's no one else here. It's on me. But people are going through this every day, and we don't have a national conversation about it. There aren't enough men talking about this. And I was discussing this just yesterday with another pound discussion. And that's something I think, Sean, that we can also try to bring to light, find more and more men to have the conversation and maintain the conversation.
Exactly.
Because it's often just kind of put in a corner and seen as a woman's issue. And women's issue, for whatever strange reason, are often considered a minority issue, despite the fact they're 51% of the population.
Saying it nicely.
It doesn't make much. It doesn't compute. But I think
It's horrific.
It's horrific, and it's not fair. And like you're saying, in UK, it's worse than it's here, as bad as it is here, because there's no consequences, and there needs to be either a new guard or a new conversation, a new narrative, louder voices, because this it's not sustainable. It's not. This isn't what we're fighting. This isn't what we're not proud living in a country that has this, and we do nothing about. We're people who are in a position to make that change. So we owe it to ourselves and the next generation and the previous generation, to be honest, to make that change.
And
Um,
as advocates, as advocates, it is our job to not turn our back, and you have to be careful. Just like what you've said, I've intervened. I'm a big guy. I'm 265. I'm 6'2". So, I'm a big guy, but I've stepped in, and you can get yourself. I'm not to say you can almost get yourself killed sometimes, and so you have to be very careful. I say tread lightly, but usually when somebody gets involved, the escalation drops.
Right.
But most of the time it's alcohol. Most of the time it's alcohol, and I'd say 90% of the time it's alcohol,
right,
and drugs, because they're just so looped out of their minds, and they get jealous of some ridiculous reason. I'm talking about adults 40, 50 years old, and young teenagers, and then middle-aged 20 in their 20s. So it doesn't matter. So I find that 79, I think it was 81% we said over the last 3 years, the calls we got in the foundation hotline is all alcohol related. All.
that was my neighbor. That was my neighbor. He would be just more drunk than anyone I could recall. And there was, I remember this one night in particular that she kicked him out, and he was outside the door. No, she wouldn't let him in. The problem was oftentimes he would ring her bell and our bell, so I'd be one in the morning, like, now you woke me up. Now I have to get involved because I'm annoyed. Like, you are not just annoying me because I can kind of tell what's happening, but now you're waking up my baby, all this shit. And I sat aside with him. I said, listen, and if anyone's hearing this and they wish to get involved, I'm not going to say you should or you shouldn't, but I'll just tell you what I did and what worked for me. I am excellent. This is not to be a humble brag. This is a straight up brag. I'm a masterful de-escalator. I need to be, because my background as a behavior therapist. I work with aggressive children who have special needs. They are not always going to just follow the rules, and you need to understand how to, both verbally and with body language, de-escalate them. So when he was out and I see him trying to bang on the door, I just came out and said, listen, I don't care what the issue is, but this doesn't work. Whatever's happening between you two, this does not. And then he paused. He looked at me because he was just surprised that I'm even approaching him, that I'm having a conversation with him. And it just shifts the focus with him and with other people in the past. And I said, let's chat. Do you need something to drink? Do you need water? And we stood outside in the stairwell for like a good hour until the cops arrived. And even then, we still chatted for a while because I just wanted to bring his energy down. I just wanted to change his directive from whatever was going on in his mind, whatever train he was on, to my neighbor is talking to me and will not stop talking to me. I'm not trying to fight him. I'm not yelling at him. I'm speaking to him in a very calm demeanor through and through. And that shifts the energy. And I think a lot of times we underestimate how powerful calm is. Peace can overwhelm if you know how to yield it. But going back to the needs, we do need to find ways to prevent this. And this goes back to what we were discussing earlier, Michelle, about my desire to speak to young men. Because if we can get 13-year-old, 14-year-old, 15, 16, 17-year-old men to understand that your partner is not your property. No one is yours. And you are no one. They are a free person. And guess what? They will disagree with you because they are a free person and they're allowed to. And they will have a life and they will have friends. And some of their friends will be the same sex and some of their friends will be the opposite sex. And that's okay. And you need to be set in your manhood and not feel like if she has a conversation with another man that you need to be triggered. You need to understand that she and you have an agreement. And you also are allowed to have friends of both sexes or both genders or various genders. And that's okay.
And let me just jump in for a minute. So a lot of domestic violence, the homicides that happens, it's so sad. Like occasionally we hear the horrific stories of the man or the woman, not so much woman, it's probably 90% the men on this situation. I'm not saying 90% across the whole frontier of domestic violence, because everyone for years said it's 80, 90% the man. That's not actually true. It's about 60-40, okay? In reality, I've done some crazy, I should be a data scientist, but I've done some crazy data research. So in any event, what I'm getting at is, so when the domestic violence breaks out, a lot of men don't even report it because they're like, I'm the big guy and she's small, or whatever the case may be. Men are like, I'm just going to get taken. I don't want to go to jail. I want to get a felony on this. And it could be that she started the fight, she got drunk, whatever the case may be, right? So what happens is the men don't report the abuse at all. They just take the beat, hit with the bottle over the head, whatever. They might be fighting. He'll leave. The police will come and the police just leave or something, whatever the case may be. So I'm just bringing out the point that is very sad that men don't report. But what's happening is the tide's changing. The stats are starting to reflect nationally and globally. Men are reporting, and things are starting to change. But this isn't about fighting for men and or women. This is about awareness. Our podcast is to bring awareness to people that are listening, that are living in this type of abuse, to wake them up, to let them know you do not have to live like this. There's resources. You can go into family counseling, coaching with our foundation. A lot of time our coaches, I'm a coach as well, and I'm a certified hypnotherapist, and I'm good at it. And I'll tell you, what I sometimes find when we bring them in for family dynamics coaching, we'll just talk roughly, and they'll be quite frank and ask, is this stuff being recorded? Will anybody see? I said, it's completely confidential. We don't take notes, nothing. It's just coaching. We're just talking shop. And what we find out is that the husband kind of feels like he's got mental illness and he wants to get treatment. So it opens up doors that he loves his wife, but he doesn't know why he's so controlling or whatever. And then they end up putting on some medication, and it saves their relationship and saves the family as a whole. So there is other sides of the spectrum, and that a lot of mental health, undiagnosed mental health issues cause domestic violence because of economic reasons. They don't have insurance, so he can't go see a doctor, and he's in denial. So sometimes if they don't go to a doctor per se, but to like a coaching session, it's kind of laid back. It's not like, we're taking notes. It's going to be on your history. If you got a job, you're afraid your boss might find out and get fired. So we do things really kind of really laid back kind of environment, and it works. It really works. You get them to feel comfortable. You tell them we don't take records. If we get subpoenaed, we don't have any records to give. So it's just all us talking. And I always say, though, if you tell me that you're going to try to kill your wife, your husband here, I have to report that. I have to. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So I have two very important questions that we have to squeeze in because our time is like here.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to get right into them.
Great.
For those who may not have the financial resources to hire an attorney, what are some options to ensure that these survivors still have access to legal representation?
Okay, so 3 different options that survivors have. You have Legal Services Corporation. You have Coalition Against Domestic Violence. These both can provide low-cost, no-cost services. And a third option that people can use that a lot of people don't realize is readily available is law students. A lot of times you can go to an L3 law student and ask for their services, and they will provide service for free. They will get the proper tutelage, but they will give you that free services available. This goes across the board for a lot of legal services, mind you. But those 3 in particular, I would say reach out to. Okay? Legal Services Corporation, Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and your local law school, wherever you're located. If you're like, wait a second, I got one that's a couple miles away, inquire. Say, hey, I'm going through the situation. Is it possible I can get legal representation from one of the law students? And they'll walk you through it.
That's great information. Okay, let's good advice would you give to someone who feels intimidated, overwhelmed by the legal process?
Seek out the Advocacy Network. Again, that's their job to help walk you through, and also to be not just your confidant, but also your aide, your friend, someone that you can put essentially be an ear and a shoulder for you to cry. You're not alone. The only way to really stay overwhelmed is to try and carry the burden all by yourself. You don't need to do that for yourself, for your kids. Reach out to the community. If your community is smaller than you'd prefer, or you may have moved because your partner made you move, or you no longer talk to people, reach out to the advocacy network because they will be there for you. If you do have people in your network that you still talk to, coworker, old friends, etc., reach out to them again. Let them know, hey, I know we haven't spoken in a while. I just want to touch base, see how you're doing. Also, I could use someone to just hear me out for a little bit. Don't be afraid to reconnect. A lot of people don't realize that the pathway is almost always open, no matter how long it's been. But it will require you to make that first step if it's been over a year, right? Reach out. Don't carry it by yourself. That's the most important takeaway. You don't need to. And then also, victimsvoice.app, use that service to keep that paper trail. So that way you don't feel like you have to hide your work, so to speak. And that you do have a case that's being built up that's admissible in court. But again, reach out. Seek community.
Great. Thank you.
Cheers.
Awesome. All right. So if you could just tell our audience where they can find you, follow you.
Absolutely. So my nonprofit is called Community for a Cause. You can see our site at communityforacause.org. We're on Instagram, Community for a Cause. We're on TikTok, Community for a Cause. You find me there. Reach out if you have questions. And again, look into the advocacy organizations in your area to find out who is available to you. Start to get to know their name. Visit them in person if you can. Okay. That's the best way to go. Just take a trip one day and say, hey, I might be going through it. I might need to reach out to you sometime soon. I just want to introduce myself. My name's Jake. Get their card, take a picture, email the picture of the card to yourself so you have the information. If you don't want to have any paper trail because your partner is someone who snoops, but put yourself out there. And build that community. Again, my name is Chris Lake. It's really been an honor and a pleasure to chat with both you, Michelle, and Sean. Thank you so much for having me. And for those of you listening, you are not alone. You are not alone. Okay?
Thank you so much, Chris. You're like a scholar. I love you. Thank you.
I appreciate the compliment, brother.
And we are gonna work together. We're gonna do great things.
Absolutely. The world needs to change, and it's people like us who can do it.
And remember, as I always say, power is in numbers.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of I'm a Survivor of Domestic Violence, Inc. We hope this conversation about legal rights and advocacy has given you valuable insight into how to navigate the legal system and access the support you deserve. Remember, you have rights, and you don't have to do this alone.
Absolutely. If you're unsure where to start, reach out to legal aid organizations, advocacy groups, or support networks within the state you live in. They can guide you through the process and ensure that your voice will be heard. The more you know about your rights, the more empowered you become.
A big thank you to our guests for being here today and for sharing such crucial information. And to all our listeners, thank you for joining us. If you found today's episode helpful, please share it with others who might need it. And don't forget to subscribe and rate our podcast. Together, we can break the silence and create a more supportive, informed community for survivors.
Take care, stay strong, and always remember, there is hope and there is help. You are not alone in this fight.
Until next time, stay safe, stay empowered, and keep moving forward.